Hi guys, welcome back again for another update. This time I have the update of the Sharron Prior case. That is a case that I covered in my video, 5 Unsolved Teen Murders in Canada, and if you haven't watched it, please do go back and do so. In the meantime, I will do a recap with some more details about Sharron's life. Sharron was a 16-year-old girl living in the Pointe St. Charles neighborhood in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, or as the locals called it, the Point. In 1975, Sharron was abducted and sexually assaulted and dumped in a field. Sharron Kim Prior was born on February 9, 1959 to Yvonne Prior and George Prior, a Canadian soldier. Sharron's twin sisters Maureen and Doreen were born just days before her second birthday on February 6, 1961. In Sharron's mind, her sisters were a gift for her birthday. In 1962, George was transferred to Manitoba, where he and his family welcomed a son named George Jr. George and Yvonne's marriage unfortunately did not last, and they divorced in 1965, when Yvonne took the kids back to the Point in Montreal. Sharron's family described her as gentle, caring, and responsible, a person who often took in strays and nursed him back to health. Her twin sisters said she aspired to become a veterinarian. She was well-behaved and cautious, according to her mother Yvonne. A local youth organization gave her the opportunity to play floor hockey and take arts and crafts classes. She was a typical teenager who enjoyed music, hanging out with friends, and had a boyfriend named John. She also had a close group of friends. There was nothing unusual about the day that Sharron disappeared. It was the Easter weekend that year, so Yvonne had gone shopping for some essentials for her Easter dinner. Sharron stayed home with her little brother George, who was 11 at the time, and Stephen, who was 4 years old. Now, Stephen was a child that the family was fostering. Sharron spent the day decorating Easter eggs with the little kids as they were excited for the Easter holiday. When Yvonne got home from shopping, Sharron told her that she needed to go to the Leo's Boys Club to pick up her Leo's Boys coat. Now, Leo's Boys is an organization that gives kids the chance to play a variety of sports without any cost to their families. So I've read that there was a time in the Point where you couldn't go just a couple of feet without seeing a kid in a green jacket with a Leo's Boys crest. By selling enough raffle tickets, the kids got green jackets, and Sharron had finally sold enough to get one. Her mom agreed to let her take Stephen, so off they went on their way. When she got to the store, though, she found that the size that she wanted was not available, so they gave her a receipt to come back another time to claim her size. Sharron was home again by 4:30, decorating Easter eggs with the kids. One of her close friends who lived nearby stopped over to her house between 6 and 7. They had been friends since they were about 5, but they didn't hang out much with Sharron's group of friends, probably because they went to different high schools. Sharron got ready for a night out. She was headed to a local pizzeria, Marina's Pizzeria, with her friends and her boyfriend. So when Sharron did leave her house around 7, she was with her friend, but as her friend didn't want to go to the pizzeria, they pretty much parted ways immediately. Her friend did ask if she wanted her to walk with her to the pizzeria, but Sharron declined and crossed the street and went on her way. Now, Marina's Pizzeria was located on the corner of Wellington Street and Ash Avenue, which was just about 5 blocks from Sharron's house. When Sharron didn't show up at the restaurant, her friends thought that she had gone to a hockey game with her boyfriend John and his friends. But then when the boys showed up, Sharron was not with them either. Yvonne became worried when Sharron didn't arrive home on time that night, because she always called if she was going to be late. Her mom contacted her friends, who informed her that Sharron never showed up at the pizza place. Also, her boyfriend hadn't seen her. Sharron's friend told Yvonne, quote, "I don't want to worry you, but a woman was attacked on Ash Avenue around 7 p.m. So it goes without saying that Yvonne was freaked out and reported Sharron's disappearance to the police right away. To find Sharron, police and volunteers began a major search in Pointe St. Charles. Within 2 days of her disappearance, more than 100 kids and adults took to the streets to search for her. Her mother went on TV and pleaded for the safe return of her daughter. Sadly, Sharron's badly beaten body was found in a wooded field in Longueuil across the St. Lawrence River from Montreal, 3 days after she disappeared. A man's t-shirt had been used to restrain her. A local beekeeper found her in a field after receiving word that his apiary's gate was open. He thought that was strange, as every night he locked the padlock before leaving, and the night before was no exception. To his surprise, he discovered a dead body in the field. As I mentioned, Sharron had been badly beaten. She had choke marks on her neck, her nose was broken, she had a hole in her cheek, possibly from a tooth, and her chest had been crushed by possibly the assailant's knee. She was dressed in a suede coat, sweater, shoes, and socks. Her pants were found about 6 feet away from her body, and her underwear were hanging from a tree. There was partially chewed tape also found in her hair, indicating that she was most likely gagged. She clutched a branch in her hands and there was blood and branches in her hair. Police found a man's shirt at the scene and the detectives concluded that this was used to bind her. A ring with the word love engraved on it, a page from an English magazine, a car seat cushion, and a receipt for a jacket with the name Sharron Prior were also found. Also found at the crime scene was a tire mark, as well as the footprint of an individual determined to weigh approximately 200 pounds. At this point, Sharron's family was unaware that she had been found. So they were home worried to death about Sharron, and especially after hearing the news report of the attack on a 23-year-old woman, just blocks from where Sharron was walking, scared them, because the way the attacker took off could have landed him right in Sharron's path. So in the case of the 23-year-old woman who was attacked, police brought her in to try and identify the attacker, but she wasn't able to identify him, so nobody was charged. So this attack on this woman was committed by a man with a knife. The mustached man, he was dubbed, because he was described as white, English, 6 feet tall, about 200 pounds, with a mustache. The incident occurred on Wellington Street, the same street where Marina's Pizzeria was located, and he fled through an alleyway to the north. It was thought that Sharron might have walked right into him. Yvonne was up early on the morning of April the 1st, when she spotted an acquaintance knocking at her neighbor's door, with a newspaper in his hand. A feeling of something being off led her outside to ask him why he was up so early. He did not answer and continued to knock. Yvonne started crossing the street, where he met her halfway. She took the newspaper and headed back home without saying a word. He called after her, telling her not to look at the picture, but it was too late. Yvonne said, quote, "I knew it was her, I knew her shoes." She called the police as soon as she could, but she was too distraught herself to identify Sharron, so she asked her brother to do so. The autopsy revealed that Sharron had been raped, beaten, and suffocated. A pointed instrument, perhaps a ring, caused the blows to her head. A DNA sample was extracted from the shirt left at the crime scene, which police believe was used to bind Sharron. But in 1975, there wasn't really much that they could do with that. They felt that she may have been alive when the assailant left her in the snow, judging by the tightly gripped branches in her hands. There was a blood trail that went from her body to the tire tracks, and the lack of drag marks or shoe prints, as well as the lack of mud on Sharron's shoes, suggested to police that she may have been carried out of the car. Her autopsy also revealed that she died Tuesday afternoon, which meant that she had been held from Saturday evening until Tuesday. That's terrifying. I can't imagine how scared she was. I know that information is important to know, but I kind of wish it didn't come out because it just adds another layer of depravity to the case. A memorial service was held for Sharron on April 4th, 1975 at St. Matthew's Presbyterian Church, and it was attended by approximately 200 mourners. So, in Yvonne's opinion, Sharron didn't get far from her house, as a neighbor who was driving down the street when Sharron left would have passed her if she had gone in the direction of Marina's, but the neighbor didn't see Sharron. According to Yvonne, her daughter was not physically tough and likely would have frozen up if she was confronted by an attacker. One theory was that Sharron had accepted a ride from a passing vehicle and had been attacked, but based on what her family has said about her, I don't think that is likely. The most likely scenario seems to be that Sharron was abducted and held captive. This is especially true when considering that a 23-year-old woman was attacked at knife point only minutes before Sharron vanished, just mere blocks away. Police believed her killer drove onto the field and disposed of her. They believed her killer returned to his car and retrieved her jeans and underwear, which led them to speculate that the killer was familiar with the area. Probably the assailant thought the field wouldn't be used for a while and that she wouldn't be found until spring. An FBI profiler was assigned to work on theories for the case, and he came up with several conclusions about the attacker. According to his profile, the killer was younger, possibly in his 20s. He likely lived with his parents in the local area. He probably had previous experience since it was unlikely to be his first offense. According to him, the assailant who attacked the 23-year-old woman could have also been Sharron's attacker. A killer who enters what they consider a killer mindset is more likely to take risks, such as attempting to abduct a second victim. Statistically, too, it is also very unlikely to have two people abducting women at the same time in the same low-crime area. In addition, he said the killer was familiar with the area, specifically the disposal site, since these areas are considered high risk. Choosing a familiar and comfortable place would have been important to the assailant. Sharron was held captive for days, indicating sadistic behavior. By understanding this sadistic pattern, the profiler felt that the list of suspects could be narrowed down. He said sadists usually seek compliant victims within their social circles. At first, they seem nice and charming, especially to vulnerable young women. However, over time, they become increasingly demanding, asserting control, and eventually resorting to degrading and violent behavior. So as compliant victims become scarce, they may seek out assistance from escorts or strangers. And when these avenues have been exhausted, they resort to hunting strangers. Using this analysis, he advised police to focus on those with a history of minor domestic arrests or solicitations, as they might fit Sharron's killer's profile. Also, he noted that the assailant on the street who attempted to abduct the 23-year-old lacked strong interpersonal skills, which indicated he could not manipulate her with sophisticated deception. Furthermore, he said the wounds on Sharron's face indicated that the assailant did not possess the skills to maintain control, so he used violence. Since the abduction appeared to have been committed by a stranger, the perpetrator was likely to be classified as a serial offender, and those guys rarely stop on their own. So following Sharron's death, police received a total of 60 tips. By 13 months into the investigation, they had questioned at least 31 people, with 6 being singled out as prime suspects. It is alleged that some of those initial suspects were Frank Daly, also known as Terry Moore, the pizzeria's manager, as well as several people associated with him, the beekeeper and the adjacent property owner. Due to a lack of information in each one, though, they were all released. All of her close friends and boyfriend were also interviewed, but none of them had any useful information. So several other girls in the area had been murdered, so police feared that Sharron's murder may have been connected to those. A 12-year-old girl named Norma O'Brien was found dead in a field near Chateauguay the previous summer. Like Sharron, Norma had been assaulted and mutilated, and she had been asphyxiated. A year later, Debbie Fisher, 14 years old, disappeared. She had left her uncle's place to ride 10 minutes to her house, but she never arrived. Her body was found in an abandoned car in the woods. She had been brutally beaten with a rock. But this case was not related to Sharron after all, because in the end this case was solved when police arrested a minor who was just a few years older than Debbie. One of the other cases that may have been related to Sharron's was the death of Tammy Leakey, who was a 12-year-old girl found 6 years after Sharron. The two cases were almost too similar to ignore. On March 20th, 1981, Tammy was visiting her grandmother when she was sent to the store for milk, but never returned. She disappeared just blocks from where Sharron disappeared. A man found her body later that evening. The case of Tammy remains unsolved, and the assault she sustained was similar to that of Sharron's. Now, the main reason that people tried to link Sharron and Tammy Leakey was, of course, that they were both snatch and grab situations and the close proximity. I mean, it happened within 2 to 3 blocks from each other. So what I do know from briefly looking into Tammy Leakey's case was that her clothing did contain samples of sperm, which were sent to the Montreal Crime Lab for analysis, but I do not know whether these DNA samples yielded results or whether they survived throughout the years. So the FBI profiler believed that the guy they were looking for was talked to by police, and either his confidence grew as he left without handcuffs, or he got spooked and moved away. Over the years, amateur detectives have tried to link Sharron's murder to other murders and supposed confessions. Ultimately, none of them did work out. I'm just going to mention one. In a book called The Hard Road, written by Peter Edwards, which is about the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club in Montreal, there is a brief mention of Sharron's murder. Apparently, one of the club members, Mike French, nicknamed Crazy Mike, said that he had killed Sharron in Point St. Charles, 7 years before he himself died. Obviously, this was not true. Also, in an effort to gain more insight, police conducted a hypnosis session with the woman who saved the 23-year-old. After the session, police showed her some photos, and one man stood out to her, William Patrick Fife, who was a convicted Canadian serial killer who killed 5 women in Montreal, although he claimed to have killed up to 9. But his first recorded killing was in 1979, which did not match Sharron's case in 1975. Moreover, there was no evidence to link him to her death. Sadly, over time, leads dried up and information stopped flowing in as time passed, and the case went cold. 25 years after her disappearance, in 2000, Yvonne wrote to the police requesting that the evidence in Sharron's case be reviewed. Her hope was that advances in technology would shed light on the investigation. However, after a week, the request was denied due to the fact that most of the evidence had already been discarded. While Yvonne was obviously hurt and distraught, she persisted, asking police to locate Sharron's clothing, which fortunately had been preserved. Police analyzed the clothes and came up with a DNA sample that did not match Sharron's. But it also did not match anything in any of the DNA databases. In 2004, police received a tip about a garage space 1 block south of Marina's Pizzeria. According to the tip, Sharron might have been held in the garage. It was hoped that DNA could be extracted from this garage for further investigation. Unfortunately, neither of the 3 samples collected matched Sharron or her killers. The last update in the case was 2012, when police announced a $10,000 reward had been offered by an anonymous donor. In addition to setting up a new command post in Point St. Charles, police also established a dedicated phone line. At the time, Constable Mark David, on behalf of Longueuil Police, the force that has retained the cold case for decades, said, quote, "We are meeting with citizens who might have lived in the Point St. Charles area 35 years ago, and we're trying to receive any tips that could help us advance in this case." However, he acknowledged that finding the killer may be a faint hope after all this time. However, he did hope that the reward offered would provide some incentive. So Sharron's family over the years, particularly her mother, Yvonne, and her sisters, Maureen and Doreen, were very active in finding Sharron's killer. Despite her grief, Yvonne dedicated herself to finding Sharron's killer, and her grief motivated her to find answers and to help others. She spent hours each week connecting with parents across Canada and even the United States through social media and networking. To preserve Sharron's memory, the family set up a website. In addition to a website, which contains links to unsolved murder cases across Canada and Quebec, and a Facebook page with nearly 1,000 members, Yvonne and her twin daughters, Doreen and Maureen, constantly searched the internet for connections and opportunities to raise awareness about Sharron and other missing children as well. Doreen said, quote, "In the 70s, we didn't have computers or social networking. There was no child find when Sharron went missing. There was no Amber Alert, no poster campaigns. There was paper and radio, but now there is so much more. Photos can be posted online and distributed around the world in minutes. The first 48 hours are the most critical in a missing person's case. So now when a child goes missing, we want it out there in the public's eye right away." In addition, the family is also very hands-on. A girl named Teresa Elor disappeared in 1978 from Sherbrooke, Quebec. Her body was later found discovered face down in water with only her bra and underwear. So in 2006, her family decided to conduct their own search near the spot where her body was found to try and recover evidence that may have been missed years before. Yvonne and her daughters joined the Elor family in their search for clues, although no conclusive evidence was found. Although the Longueuil Police Department said at the time that they'd yet to link Sharron's case with a serial killer, Yvonne suspected otherwise. She believed Sharron may have been the victim of a serial killer who roamed the country, perhaps by train, targeting young girls who were similar in age and appearance. I'm not sure where she stands on this today, but I would imagine it's probably different. Yvonne also expressed frustration with the police, saying, quote, "I wish the police would share the evidence they have from my daughter's case. I might see or pick up something that even after all these years might have been missed or overlooked during the early days of the investigation." Despite looking into more than 70 potential suspects, no arrests have ever been made, and the somber words of Sharron's sister Doreen echoed throughout the years. Quote, "I only hope it's solved in my mother's lifetime." And that is how the case stayed for 48 years until... Longueuil Police announced in May 2023 that DNA testing had proven Franklin Maywood Romine, an American from West Virginia who had died in 1982, was responsible for the rape and murder of Sharron Prior in 1975. How did they figure this all out? Well, genetic genealogy, of course, but with a little twist. So like I had mentioned, DNA was recovered from a shirt that was believed to have been used to bind Sharron, and it was found at the crime scene. There wasn't much they could do with it in 1975, of course. And even in the decades that followed, it was pretty much still useless because forensic DNA analysis was still in its infancy for so many years, and once techniques did advance enough for them to be able to analyze the DNA, they couldn't match it to anyone in any database. But as a result of advances in DNA technology, police were finally able to match the shirt's DNA to Romine's family via genealogical websites. In 2022, scientists at the Laboratoire des Sciences Judiciaires et de Médecine Légale de Québec decided to try something new. There was no doubt that the DNA left at the scene belonged to a man. Y chromosomes are passed from father to son in biological males, so they decided to try matching that Y chromosome to something else that was often passed from father to son, family names. They used a new DNA database to compare what was found at the crime scene to DNA that had already been matched to certain paternal lines. They figured this method might not lead to an exact match, but it could help point them in the right direction. Fortunately, it did work. Based on the killer's Y chromosome, they were able to identify two possible paternal lines, Romain or Romine. As genetic genealogists traced Romine's family tree in Quebec based on data provided voluntarily to ancestry sites and linked it to DNA from the crime scene, Eric Rakicot, and I'm sure I said that wrong, the Longueuil police detective investigating the case was searching public databases, newspapers, etc. to locate Franklin Romine, and he did discover a Franklin Romine living in Montreal the year that Sharron was murdered. Rakicot believed that Romine lived just 9 kilometers away from Sharron on Descartes Boulevard. His physical description matched the description of the man who attempted to abduct the 23-year-old woman on Wellington Street, according to witnesses. Additionally, Romine owned a dark red Rambler with the same tires as the vehicle that left a tire print where Sharron's body was found. Romine previously lived in Longueuil as well, the area where Sharron's body was discovered. He had a heavy criminal record in Canada and in the US for serious violent crimes, including sexual assault. In 1982, Romine died of unknown causes at the age of 36. He was living in Verdun, which is a neighborhood of Montreal, and he was buried in West Virginia. While Franklin Romine was not alive himself, he did have 2 living brothers, who willingly provided DNA samples. Franklin Romine was described as violent and known for sexually assaulting women by his brothers when police did contact them. According to Rakicot, one of them said his brother probably killed Sharron in a spontaneous statement. The DNA of Romine's brothers confirmed suspicions Franklin was likely responsible for Sharron's murder. In order to confirm their suspicions, police requested the exhumation of Franklin Romine's body in West Virginia. For religious reasons, Romine's siblings opposed his exhumation, however, a judge allowed it to proceed. On May 2, 2023, Romine's body was exhumed and his DNA was sent to a laboratory in Montreal. Police confirmed on May 23, 2023, that the DNA matched the Romine family from Charleston, West Virginia. The full genetic profile of Romine's bones was difficult to retrieve, according to the director of Quebec's National Forensic Laboratory. However, quote, "We were able to establish a genetic profile by comparing it to the unknown profile in Sharron Prior's case. We remarked that it was identical, which confirmed that it was indeed Franklin Romine who left his DNA at the scene." When Franklin Romine's name first appeared on police's radar, they noted that it was the first time they had heard that name associated with Sharron's case. For nearly 5 decades, his name had never been raised as a suspect in the case. Seems to be a common theme among these updates that I've done lately. As Romine is dead, no charges will be brought against him as the case is now closed. So what do we know about Franklin Romine? Well, not a whole lot actually. Franklin Maywood Romine was born on April 2nd, 1946 in Huntington, West Virginia, in the United States. He had at least 2 sisters and 3 brothers, one of whom had passed away. Romine appeared in family photos as a tall man with reddish-brown hair and a mustache, and that matched witness descriptions of the man who had attempted to abduct the 23-year-old woman the same night that Sharron went missing. His brother admitted in court that he had attempted to abuse his wife. I am not sure whether it is the same brother or not, but one of the brothers also spontaneously told police that Romine probably did murder Sharron. We know that he had a long criminal record dating back to when he was a child. He allegedly fled to Canada after committing a rape in West Virginia in 1974, where not long after he abducted, raped, and murdered Sharron. After that, he was arrested in Montreal and extradited back to the United States, but eventually did find his way back to Montreal, where he died in 1982 under mysterious circumstances. And that is pretty much the extent of what I could find about Franklin Romine. Police have said that a total of 122 subjects of interest were investigated in relation to Sharron's murder. Out of that number, 40 were excluded by their DNA or through wiretaps. Another 60 were excluded for different reasons, be that they were incarcerated when Sharron was killed or simply because the information was unfounded. At the news conference where police announced that Franklin Romine was Sharron's killer, Doreen, her sister, said, quote, "The solving of Sharron's case will never bring Sharron back, but knowing that her killer is no longer on this earth and cannot kill anymore brings us somewhat of a closure." Sharron's twin sisters said that when she went missing that Easter weekend so long ago, the family was distraught. Even decades later, they are still scarred by the violence and tragedy of her death. Her sister Maureen said, quote, "We will always be your mom, your little brother and sisters who sat there at that window that Easter weekend, hoping to see you walking on home. You may have never come back to your house on Congregation Street that weekend, but you have never left our hearts and you never will. We love you, Sharron. May you now truly rest in peace." The sisters also went on to say that it had been, quote, "an incredibly long and difficult journey leading to this day." Their mother was 85 years old in 2023, and she was also at attendance in this press conference. The sisters said that she knew immediately something was wrong just minutes after her eldest daughter was due home on March 29, 1975. The family thanked police in Longueuil for their long-term efforts, as well as the Point St. Charles and online communities who rallied around them. Their sisters also thanked other Quebec families navigating their own cold cases for accompanying them on much of their journey. The sisters also grew emotional as they described Sharron. Quote, "She was a kind, warm-hearted young girl who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. She was a beautiful young lady with a heart of gold." As part of his petition to the West Virginia court to exhume Franklin Romine's body, Eric Rakicot said, quote, "I think it's an understatement to say that the victim's family was devastated." He noted that Sharron's mother, Yvonne, was still alive and was now 85 years old. Quote, "She spent her whole life trying to find her daughter's killer. That's why we never gave up on it over the years." I think the right note to leave this case on is what the Longueuil police said about Sharron's family, and that was that the family's dogged pursuit of justice was a key factor that led them to finding the killer. Thank you for taking the time to listen. So I've been working on trying to get this podcast more up to date and giving it more of a social media presence. So please do look it up on Facebook and Instagram as Unjust Crimes. I've also been working on creating a website, which is quite the work in progress, so keep tuned for updates on that. I've also been asked many times in the past how people can donate, which I have to say is pretty amazing that anyone would want to do that, so I've decided to add a PayPal link to my YouTube channel. You can find it on my channel's main page, and I just want to say to anyone that may want to donate, man, thank you so much. In the meantime, please do subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. And until next time, stay safe out there.